Good morning and welcome. You're still watching Power Breakfast right here on Citizen TV, and it's now time when we take a look at the headlines. And this morning, of course, headlining is the biggest headline we have is the president's remarks yesterday while in Kisii. And on the Daily Nation, the president says Raila fund poll violence. In a significant escalation, president accuses his rival of having been at the center of the 2007 chaos. On the Standard, Uhuru Raila clash over 2007 violence. Now that's the main story today. In studio we do have Bwana Karanja Kabage on my extreme left, an analyst, karibu sana. Next to him we have Bwana Chris Omalwa, MP for Kiminini. And on my right we have Bwana Joe Mutambu, MP Mwingi Central. These are the gentlemen who will help us look at the headlines this morning. Now, before we even come to the president's remarks, there's another headline that we could miss out if at all we could miss out on if at all we decide to start off with the politics. So let's talk about the doctors' issues first. And doctors have issued a fresh threat over salaries. Doctors have given the health ministry up to tomorrow to withdraw its communication to county governments that those who took part in the strike should not be paid for the days they were away. Now, of course, coming barely a week, was it a week or so after the strike ended, now we see things are still not so good, because now the Ministry of Health has directed the county governments not to pay allowances to the doctors for the days they were on strike. Now this presents a problem, of course, so we do not want to go back to where we were, but this push and pull, Bwana Kabage, should we really be going back to it? After all, there was a deal. What's the big deal about paying doctors their allowances for days, for those 3 months that they were not on duty?
Well, thank you, Fred. Let's first of all look at the return to work formula that was signed between the doctors and the council of governors and even the ministry. What did it provide? Okay, that's the first thing that you need to look at. Secondly, we need to ask ourselves, if you are seeking for allowances, you are seeking for allowances for what? Because you're not working, all right? So I think we have to reach a point as a country to determine whether there is equity. And equity here means you are paid for services you have provided. If you don't provide service, on what basis should you be paid? It has nothing to do with the doctors.
Yes.
It is a principle.
Okay.
As an employer, if an employee does not provide service, why do you pay him?
Okay. Bwana Amalo, do you agree with Bwana Kabage, or do you think the doctors are justified?
I want to totally differ with him.
Yes.
You cannot come and talk of equity, and yet there's something called return to work. Return to work means the agreements, what you've agreed. What are you going to cede? What are you going to give? So that we get back. So we agreed. This is an agreement that was agreed before you get back. So you can't come and negate and talk about the issue of equity, and yet you promise to each other, get back and you're going to pay you the allowances. Of course, there's some opportunity costs that were incurred here and there. Lives were lost. Doctors also suffered in their own way. So this is a two-way. So when you talk of return to formula, what it means, and I want my brother here to understand, you agreed that you are going to go back on these conditions. So you're obligated to fulfill what you agreed. You cannot go and negate about what you agreed.
Yes.
It's totally out of order.
Bwana Mutambu, what do you think of this?
Listening to Amalwa, you wonder what kind of leaders we have in this country. You really wonder. And if we can really either lead a country or an institution. Talking from the point Kabaga's left, I'm an entrepreneur. And there is payment for what you offer. Are we talking about their salaries, or we are talking about the allowances? Chris gets a salary, but he also gets something we call sitting allowance. When you don't sit, you don't get the allowance. And it's a simple logic. I will be on the doctor's side if they are being denied their salaries. But I think if you mentioned allowances, there is a difference between allowance and the salary. So are we talking about, because I've not even gotten the gist of what are they demanding.
It is the allowances. If
it is allowances, then the allowances you are paid when, I mean there's what comes with the allowances. And if that, what comes with the allowances was not performed, then why are you asking for it? For God's sake, if it's about the salary, let me tell you, if it's about the salary, because the time they were out, they were just trying to, to ask for their rights, which I support them, right? Because anybody would want to agitate to get a better pay. Yes,
but for the sake of clarity, let me just read this on page 11 of the Daily Nation, where they've given a highlight there. They're calling it the details of the allowances. The emergency call allowance shall be paid monthly. They're talking about medical interns in job group L to be paid an additional 36,000, while M, N and P to get an additional 42,000, specialists in job group Q to get an additional 50,000, and all doctors to be paid a uniform medical risk allowance of 20,000 monthly. Now those are the allowances.
With effect of when? That's also another question. With the effect on when? When does it start? Is it backdated or is it not backdated? Before we even argue and waste a lot of energy on it, we need to go to find the details of the agreement. Did they backdate?
That is a return to work. You know, when you talk of return to work, for simplicity, for better understanding of my friend Joe, when you talk of return to work formula, this was negotiated and you agreed. So what is being put here is that in the process of negotiation, they are negotiated and agreed that they are going to be paid allowances. So the argument you're putting across, it makes sense. It was a basis of the negotiations. But here they negotiated, they looked at the pros and cons, they looked at whether you worked or not, they looked at all those parameters. Then they sealed a deal and agreed, we are going to pay you the allowances.
And another highlight here, it says the ministry had written to the Council of Governors Chair Peter Munya on March 17th, 3 days after the strike ended, saying those who participated in the strike should only be paid the new allowances with effect from the date they report on duty, while those who worked throughout would get the allowances with effect from January 1st.
Yeah, so the unfortunate thing...
I think it is good to understand one thing. When you say a return to work formula has been signed, I have not cited that for return to work formula that was cited. Just a minute.
Yes,
that was signed. But listening to what you are saying there, it says those who were working.
Now this is a letter to the COG, not the return to work formula.
That's right. But when you sign the return to work formula, it spells out the basis. Now, Mheshimiwa here is speaking as if he has cited that return to work agreement. All right? You have read the papers?
Yeah, and Omar Luga, the Secretary General, has indicated, maybe I'll show you the page. Maybe you didn't have the opportunity to have gone through the papers. I went through the papers, and the Secretary General has indicated that indeed that was one of the issues they discussed. And he has threatened that if at all we're not going to go as per the return to work what we agreed.
So the doctors claim they had agreed that the allowances begin January 1st.
Absolutely.
But after that, the PSO Health wrote to the COG and said, and anyone who was on strike during that period will not receive allowances.
I think Idi.
Bonakabage was saying something.
Let me just put it clearly. Okay. You see, an agreement is a binding contract between parties. If it was clearly written that you'll be paid allowances, all right, despite the fact that you're not working, then that's a different matter. But if they are claiming allowances that were not contained in the return to work formula, I don't see the basis for paying it, because allowances, as you have said there, it is meant to be over and above what your salary. Yes. So I cannot see the basis why there should be payment of allowances.
Especially when they were
working.
Yes. My argument would be the same. If it was captured, you can discuss, and it is not captured in the agreement. If it was not captured in the agreement, then they have nothing to ask. And mind you, the ministry, either the minister or the PS, before they do anything, they have legal officers who would go and peruse the document which was signed? And if it was captured, let me tell you, and I want to repeat this, if it was captured that they will be paid, then it is their right. Because you cannot agree that this is the formula we are agreeing on and we are returning on work because of this, after signing this agreement, this is what we have agreed. We can discuss it here, and we say we want it, and then somebody says no, no, no. And before you append your thinking nature on an agreement, you go through it, you read it through all the lines, commas and everything, and then you understand. So, if it was not captured, okay, and they come and tell us we agreed and it was not captured and that person signed, then that person is incompetent.
For the interest of Honorable Joe, the Union Secretary, when he wrote to the PS, said the Union Secretary Dr. Uma Oluga's letter to the Health Principal Secretary Nicholas Muraguri termed the move demoralizing and gross violation of the return to work formula signed on March 14th. So the implication here is this: they are going contrary to what they had agreed. So that means it had been provided for. So now we blame maybe the negotiators again. Why did they agree maybe on this matter? But as far as
probably they discussed it verbally but never captured it on the agreement.
Maybe, to me it must have been there. Return to work formula which was signed. So it must have been one of the basis.
My understanding, if at all the return to work formula had captured this particular issue, then you can seek legal redress. Because now the KMPDU is threatening a specified action if at all these allowances are not paid by tomorrow. But I'm thinking, if at all the return to work formula had fully captured all these deals, then probably we should just
I think from my own point of view, I think the doctors should realize one thing. When you have appended a signature on an agreement and there is a dispute as far as that agreement is concerned, you don't go on strike. You seek a legal redress, because the court would interpret. You see, two parties, you sign an agreement. The only competent authority recognized in the Republic of Kenya is the court. So what they need to do is not to say we are going to strike. Say, okay, we have an agreement here. This agreement, from our understanding as a union, we are supposed to be paid. The employer says, no, this agreement, you are misinterpreting it. From our understanding, we are not supposed to pay. Okay, there is a dispute. Then you go to court. But for irresponsible action of saying we are going to go on strike, I think to me
let me respond to that. Let me respond to that. They have not said that.
Just a minute. Okay. They have threatened to go on strike.
They've threatened and specified that.
They are not the court.
Which is allowed constitutionally.
No. Please. What constitution are you referring to?
You are allowed to picket. You can give a notice. Strikes are allowed. But you must
they are saying tomorrow. The notice is not about a day. But
they have not specified. They've said they are going to take a stand action, which is not specific. That can be also going to court.
Specified action. They've not said
so don't think. They have not said that.
I think what to me is most important is this: when you have a dispute in a civilized society, what you do, you go to court. Because the court is supposed to be the independent arbiter. You get what I mean? And seek interpretation.
And
because coming to court is a
document that had captured that.
It's not just coming to court. I mean, we know very well courts have unlimited jurisdiction when a matter, maybe there is a dispute.
Including
but you don't have to go to court. It's not, that comes as a last resort. There are also other mechanisms which are allowed constitutionally that you can.
Like what?
For instance, as workers, if the issues have not gone as per what you wanted, we are allowed to picket. It's allowed constitutionally. Article 37 of the Constitution clearly stipulates that. So for you to decide to go to the court, courts can come in maybe as a last resort. Okay? But when you look at what the doctors have said, by saying you're going to take a stand action does not necessarily mean you are going to strike. Of course, when you go for a strike, there's a process. You don't just wake up and say you're going to have a strike. There's the issues of giving a notice and all that. So I want my brothers here to listen keenly, understand. Stand action does not necessarily mean it's a strike. Okay? It might be. Absolutely.
My brother Malo, listening to you, it's like you also want to go and strike on this show. I mean, it's like everything is based on a strike. And this is the problem we have in this country. We forget that we have a country to build. And whenever we have any differences, I mean, strike is not the last bullet. That's not a silver bullet to use all the time. And this is what has been happening. We need to mind about our country.
Yes.
We need to mind about our profession. We need to mind about what we do. This is life's concern here. And when you sit here and you tell the doctors, if you are not paid, strike tomorrow. I mean,
you see now,
striking.
maybe I should speak to Kamba for this one to understand. I've not said anywhere.
You know, I think the point
I mean, you don't need, you don't need to elaborate. You don't need to elaborate further. I can read your lips before you even open them.
Maybe I should talk to Kamba to understand.
The point is made. I
that.
think we're in agreement. The doctors have threatened and specified action if the allowances are not paid by tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Whether they choose to go to court or decide to pursue any other avenue, we will wait to see. We have to wait and see.
Yeah.
Let's now move on to other headlines, and before we come to the big headline on the front pages, let's take a look at what is happening with the IEBC. It's also a very huge story. It's on the back page of the Daily Nation. 3 billion shilling poll system tender cancelled. Now, we do have this story by Jackie Maribe on Citizen TV. I think that will help us understand this issue better and much faster. Let's have that story.
Protracted legal wars have threatened the IEBC's ability to meet its set timelines for the general election, and tender wars have been blamed for derailing the poll body's path, as such making the cancellation of its KIEMS tender official. The poll body had on December 16th last year advertised a tender to procure technology known as the Kenya Integrated Election Management System, or KIEMS, but that was challenged twice before the Public Procurement Regulatory Authority, informing the Commission's decision to stop the process altogether. In its termination letter, IEBC, through its CEO Ezra Chiloba, says the law requires the technology to be in place by 10th of April this year, and the Commission should as such have had it by end of March for use on 10th May. Thus, quote, the Commission has lost important lead times due to litigation over the tender. The Commission also cites substantial technological change as saying, quote, the Commission considered that the scope of technology requirements had changed following the recent conclusion of the mass voter registration drive. Therefore, there would be no value for money to retain the voter registration component in KIEMS at present. But IEBC believes it is still within its timelines.
We actually working to make sure that nothing stops us from giving Kenyans the election they are waiting for on the 8th of August.
Siaya Senator James Orengo, however, argues the IEBC should not hide behind ongoing litigations and now blames Jubilee of trying to build a case for amendment of the Elections Act to enable IEBC conduct a manual election. In a statement, Orengo says, quote, without the establishment of an integrated electronic electoral system, no valid elections can be held in Kenya. Meanwhile, the Attorney General, Professor Gethu Muigai, says aspirants will be subjected to integrity questions in the wake of dubious education examination certificates being presented to state agencies.
One of the major areas of our concern in this integrity testing would be a basic one. Do you hold the educational qualifications that you claim to hold?
Yeah, that story by Jackie Maribe is what we want to discuss now. It's also captured on the back page of the Daily Nation. 3 billion shilling poll system tender cancelled. Preparations for the elections yesterday appear to be thrown into a spin after the Electoral Commission cancelled the tender for a crucial component barely a week after it got the go-ahead from the Procurement Review Board. Now, of course, this has to do with the technology to be used at the election, the Kenya Integrated Electoral Management System, which is very central, and it is one of those things that were very contentious last year when there was this push to have the electoral commissioners replaced. Now, this is 4.5 months to the election. The timelines, this particular technology is supposed to be in place by 10th of April because you're supposed to be using it immediately a month later, 30 days later in May. Up till now, we have no idea if we're going to get it or not. Yes, the tender has been cancelled. Now, what happens from here? Bwana Omalo.
This is very, very unfortunate. and this is confirming our fears, particularly the people from the court side, because this law that was brought in Parliament, the amendment of the Elections Act when it comes to the issue of electronic system and giving that provision for the manual, this is where the problem is. Why the integrated system was being put in place is to link the voter registration, voter identification, and the voter transmission.
Transmission of results.
Absolutely. So that this system is integrated. So when you're going to present yourself during the voting time, they need to look at your biometrics, which you must have submitted at that particular time when you went for the voter registration.
Yes.
To ensure that if I'm going to vote like Chris Wamalwa, once the moment I put my fingers or whatever, my biometrics will identify me and say, hey, this is a true living person. It's not somebody who was resurrected from Langata Cemetery. And once that identification has been done, then it allows you, now it has verified you.
Yes.
Then you vote. And once you are registered as a voter there, it will now help in the transmission
of results. Yes.
And this issue came in to avoid the element of rigging. And the Jubilee government, who sponsored this bill, why there was this controversy, bring in the provision for manual. Now it confirms our fears that this was a calculated conspiracy, so that we don't have this integrated system, so that we have that manual aspect where we can have people from Langata Cemetery coming to vote, transmission being done manually. And when you look at the critical report, this is where we've been having all loopholes when it comes to rigging.
Yes.
And this is very dangerous because Kenyans want free and fair elections.
Okay.
The constitution is very clear that IBC must ensure the elections are free, fair and credible.
Yes.
So we are now worried.
Because a failure to have the system, it means yes, we could resort, because yes, the IEBC still insists if we change the timelines here and there, we could still be able to acquire the technology. But in absence of that, if at all we fail to get it, that means we go manual.
Let me be on record on saying this, and tell my good friend here to understand this. We are talking about technology, which can be manipulated and can fail. It happened in a developed country like America. Up to today, they are still crying that it was hacked. So for him to sit comfortably there and say, when we have an integrated system, we are safe, I want to tell him, you are not safe. Either way, you need to have an alternative. But, discussing the point, what is important to me is what the chairman has said. He has said they are in a position to give Kenyans their election they so desire in Ancaster. That is what is important to me. It is none of my business to micromanage IEBC, because the word is IEBC, independent. And if they feel they can cancel today and they re-advertise tomorrow or the day after, and they be in a position to do as per required by the law, then why they will abalu about it? For me and Chris Wamalwa, what we need to do is to don in our attire and talk to our people to elect us. But coming back to his argument of election being rigged, I want to tell him, with or without the system, elections, and I'm not saying that Jubilee will rig elections. Actually, our fears, those who sit on Jubilee's side, is that court is working tirelessly. Although the code is dead now, I hear there's something called, what is the name? Is it Kwaswa or Naswa or something? I don't know what it is.
I want us to come back. I want us to come back to the headline about the timelines. And my concern, Bwana Kabage, and this is where you come in, is the time. Yes, it's 4.5 months. According to the timeline, this technology should be in place by 10th of April, which is today is actually 23rd. Yeah, so it is approximately less than 2 weeks time. Is it practically possible to cancel the yesterday and re-advertise for tender and still be able to meet that deadline?
First, let me debunk the statement by Mheshimiwa here that our fear is that Jubilee was going to league elections, and their fears have been confirmed by what IBC is doing. First of all, they are not synonymous. IBC and Jubilee are not synonymous. IBC, by dint of our constitution, is independent of any person or any authority. That's the first thing. Secondly, I want to say this. I don't want to cast aspersion to the conduct of what the IBC is likely to do, because we have it on the authority of the chairman that they are going to conduct elections on a free and a fair basis and within the timeline provided for. So it is not my position to start doubting that authority.
But are you confident that they are still able to do it?
The point of the matter is this. First of all, I have not seen anything that tells me I should not be confident. There is no proof. And therefore, that's why I have said I am not casting aspersions.
Maybe he has not read the Kriegler report.
Well, just a minute. Forget about the Kriegler report. Kriegler report is water under the bridge. Right? As of now, we have put in systems and mechanisms that should be able to give us what we desire as Kenyans. But we also need to change our psychology, our psyche as a nation, whereby we have mistrust about anything and everything. And that's why I'm saying, let us not jump into even talking about equating IBC and Jubilee as if they are synonymous.
Yes.
That does not make sense.
But we run the risk of trivializing the debate by making it a CORD versus, rather NASA versus Jubilee thing, because I believe the concerns should be across the board. About the timelines, are we able to acquire technology within short notice and use it effectively at the elections? And I think that's the biggest issue.
Yeah,
I think it's 4.5 months to the
I
elections.
think the point here
are we
is
still able to advertise a tender, acquire the technology, integrate it to the system, and still be able to...
I think the point here is this. The authority that is supposed to conduct election in this country is Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. If the chairman has stated as such that they are going to do what is supposed to be done, then who am I for now to even start casting aspersion?
Yes.
And I think that is the real issue here.
Yet the CEO, Bwana Chilomba, seems to raise from a different script and
that's why he
says,
talks that way.
there will be a problem.
Let me explain. I think we need to understand. First of all, I thought my colleagues had an opinion, an opportunity of going through the Kriegler report. But from the way they are talking, it seems they have no clue what the Kriegler report has talked about. When you look at the Kriegler report, and this was as a result of the 2007 post-election violence, was really looking at the issue of how do you have credible elections. And one of the things that Kriegler report recommended, and this was based on the last observation, where about 200,000 people found themselves voting, and yet they were found to be dead people. And the only way to ensure that the people who are coming to vote are not the dead people is through that integrated system that is going electronically. Yes. And a lot of rigging takes place when it comes to voter transmission. We also saw what happened
of results.
Yeah. So we saw what happened in the Tharaka Nithi issue, whereby the results, when they reached Thika, they ended up multiplying. They reached Bomas, they had multiplied. So the issue was to look for a mechanism on how to avoid this issue of voter rigging. And that's why in world all over, people use these electronic gadgets. And that's why there's issue of the BVR. When you go register, they take your biometrics.
Am I listening to an elected person? Were you elected? And were you elected by dead people? Are you sitting there claiming that You are a member of
I
parliament.
wish I had an
Virgil-
opportunity of understanding Kikamba so that I speak to you in Kikamba, you understand.
Why you keep on
Because that's why you're having a problem.
This is
what
a
is the-
critical
what is the
report.
argument?
Look, my argument is
What
this.
is this a critical
He's talking about, I mean, dead people voting.
Yeah.
This is a
From the
person who sits in parliament and he claims to be legally
That's why I told
elected
you.
and he won election.
Gentlemen.
Why, if he has any
Next
doubt,
time-
if he has any doubt
Yes.
that rigging took place, you know, rigging cannot take
This
place.
was a critical report.
Gentlemen,
Do you understand
I
what the
think
report
we
is?
keep going round in
Please.
circles. I need us to discuss the
Absolutely.
timeline and the
Yeah, I was
possibility.
coming to that.
But because this argument seems to be going round and round, let's take a
No.
break. We'll be back and continue
It's
with
because
this.
my brother here is difficult.